Today we're going to talk about this. With the release of the X100VI, X100 line users got a new filming simulation that was previously reserved only for GFX users, and it's called Reala Ace. There are some slightly unsavory people hanging about shouting at me, which makes it a little bit more difficult to take pictures of this pagoda than I imagined, so we'll see if we can find another location. So, what is it? Well, Reala Ace originally was a film that was released only in Japan and was very similar to Fujifilm's Superior film. The difference being that they marketed Superior towards consumer photographers for general purpose, and Reala Ace was marketed more towards professionals for wedding and portrait photography. I personally have been experimenting with only using the Reala Ace film simulation for about the past week, and I've got some examples and thoughts that I want to share with you in this video. Now, I've been pretty vocal that Classic Chrome is my favourite film simulation. In fact, I've made a couple of videos about it on this channel. Even if I was shooting RAW and I planned to edit these, I would apply the Classic Chrome profile in Lightroom before I start to make any tweaks on my final image. I just love those rich, deep, dark shadows, punchy contrast, and really nice blacks. So what I wasn't really expecting is to start loving the Reala Ace simulation even more than Classic Chrome. But I think that's what started to happen. There's definitely less contrast, there's definitely less punchy blacks, less in way of crushing the shadows, but what there is an increase in dynamic range and a really pleasant color spectrum. I personally have found that for skin tones, it's really nice, and for a range of other subjects, I've been really enjoying this film simulation. One thing I have found is that it has really pleasing green tones. Now, if you ever try to edit an image that's got so much green in it, you'll know that it's really difficult to find that balance. I don't want it to look too desaturated, almost as if it's a black and white image, which I find a lot of photographers do. I want to get that tone exactly right on the greens, and this Reala Ace film simulation really does help me achieve the perfect green tone I like when it comes to my images. With Reala Ace, I feel like they're just right. They're luscious, there's still a nice tone to them, they're not too desaturated. There's kind of a hint of blue underlying in those green tones, which I find really pleasing. And I've found that I'm no longer scared to shoot something that's got a bit too much foliage in it anymore, because I know when it comes to editing the image, I'm going to be just fine if I'm starting with the Reala Ace profile in Lightroom as my base. I'm not afraid to admit I'm one of those photographers that kind of hates it when you see a title that's something like, edit your photos to look like film in this way. I don't think that you should edit your photos to try and look like film. If you wanted your photos to look like film for a specific project, you can shoot it on film. What I would say, and what I do appreciate, is when photos have film-like qualities. And I feel like a high dynamic range, whilst maintaining contrast across the frame, is something that film does really well, and I would look to replicate in my digital images. It can be a little bit difficult sometimes. When you're shooting on a digital sensor, there's only so many stops of dynamic range that you can achieve out of that thing. But what I think is that this film simulation really helps to show off the increased dynamic range on this brand new sensor in the X100 lineup, which is something I'm quite excited about. Now, it doesn't solve all of my problems. I still have to make sure everything is metered correctly. But what I am happy about is that it maintains shadow detail in a really nice and pleasing way without giving it that kind of raw digital HDR type look, which became really popular in the early 2000s and now is a sign of a photographer who doesn't really know how to edit their images properly. So in conclusion, this film simulation is really pleasing. I think it's a great addition to the Fuji X100 lineup, and I'm really glad that they managed to include it on this camera. But there is a little bit of a caveat. If you're going to ask me the question, is it worth upgrading just for film simulation, then I'm not sure I can answer that. For me, it was very clear that classic chrome was going to be the revolution that my photography needed. I could look at pictures I'd taken with that film simulation and I knew exactly that's what I wanted. I wanted those harsh shadows, I wanted that rich contrast, and I really thought that that was going to be a thing that would take my photography that huge step forward. Now, I still believe that that was the case, and I'm so glad that I upgraded my Fuji X100 camera just so I could get that film simulation, just so I could learn what I liked, look through the viewfinder and see something that I like shooting every single time. But would I make the same decision again for Reala Ace? For me, the answer is probably not. I think this is more of an evolution than a revolution when it comes to my photography style. I'm so glad that it's on there and I'm going to continue to experiment with it, but I don't think it's something that would take my photography forward leaps and bounds. It's completely up to you, your style and your approach. If you think that the Reala Ace film simulation is the real game changer for you, if you're looking at some of these photos and you really like some of those greens, some of those skin tones, the slight warmth that's in the images, and overall the way it handles highlights and that great dynamic range, and you think that's going to be the revolution that your photography needs, then maybe it is worth upgrading to this camera just for that film simulation alone. As always, let me know if you have any comments down below. I'll answer any questions that I see in the comment section, and if you like videos like this, subscribe because I have more stuff coming out every single week and plenty more videos on this little camera here. See you next time.